PPP programs simulation, forgiveness simulation tool right now. And we had a few questions about how some of this would work, and I wanted to share them with everyone as to how it would be put into the simulator and what the actual results will be. What you see here on the left-hand side of the screen is the actual results simulation on the forgiveness, the reduction for 75%, the reduction for headcount, and then the reduction for salaries. Now, what we've done in green here is we've isolated everything to what the current standards are. So as we make changes to this, we can see which numbers change and compare them to the originals. So these green shaded areas will stay static. On the right-hand side here is where we're going to make some of our changes. This is the data entry point for the simulation. So let's take an example. The first question is can I pay more to a given employee than I did in the base period? And the answer to that is yes, you can. And if we look at that, that's just going to increase our total payroll costs, which will really kind of affect this 75% test here. And will affect a couple of other numbers. So let's make some changes here. So I have a group of people here where I am paying them. I paid them $800 originally, and I want to increase them to $1,800, and I will copy this down and increase their pays. Now, what I've done is by doing that, I've increased the payroll cost. So now as we look over here in the sample forgiveness calculation, we can see that our payroll costs have gone from $215,000 to $279,200. And because of that, these other expenses are allowable because before I was hitting the 25% cap and I couldn't allow all my expenses. Now that my payroll costs have gone up, these are fully allowable and my total forgiveness has gone up. Because my forgiveness has gone up, instead of having a subtraction for $2,500, I've actually got a zero subtraction there, so that's returned. But what's interesting is that my reduction based on number of employees has changed. So if I look at that, really how that's computed is my ratio of headcount has stayed the same. I've just changed the rate of pay for somebody. So I haven't changed the ratio, but I've increased what I'm multiplying it by. So the payroll has gone from $215,000 to $279,000. So now when I apply that ratio, it makes a bigger negative that I have to subtract out of it. Obviously, the payroll hasn't changed because there isn't a change in reduction of salaries. So since I didn't have any additional reductions, the $6,400 stayed the same. So this is where we can see that there is a dynamic output and effect based on changing one thing and how it changes multiple items. The next question is can I pay a new employee that wasn't on the payroll? So what we're going to do here is we're going to return this to its original state. So all my numbers on the calculation side come out to be as they originally were. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a new employee for $1,800, and I don't have any original pay for them, but they received $1,800 a week for the 8 weeks. Now let's see what that has done to things. Again, my total payroll costs have gone up. It's caused my other expenses, non-payroll expenses, to be more allowable in that case. And again, my payroll has gone up. My ratio has stayed the same. But let's change the ratio. Since I added a person, I want to increase this 26 to 27. So what I'm going to do is I want to go up here and I want to change this 26 to 27. And what it's done is it's because in the data entry area, it's changed it in the simulation, and I'm actually getting a better result because I'm adding an employee. So I got rid of, by increasing my payroll cost, I have increased, or I've gotten rid of the decrease as a result of 75% of payroll costs. I have changed the number of employees, so the number of employees has gone up, so that has caused me to have a better FTE ratio, and therefore that negative has gone down. And of course, I haven't changed the rate of anyone's pay, so the reduction based on 25% change in salary hasn't really changed. Now we're going to go back and talk about part-time employees. Now, the simulation tool here does not account for part-time employees. We haven't implemented that. The first version of this forgiveness calculation was really built on our weekly salaries. And because there is no guidance on actual hourly employees, and there wasn't guidance in many areas, what we did is we realized that if we wanted to implement hourly employees, we would have an original hourly rate and a new hourly rate. And as you can see, the people here, I have changed their payroll rates and decreased them, and that would cause a decrease, and that's why these are highlighted in orange. And again, because they had a decrease that was greater than 25%, then I'm not allowed to take them as an allowable payroll cost. So this is how a simulator might look if we added the hourly rate into it, and we put the total number of hours in here worked during the 8-week period. So whether somebody works more or less hours is not relevant. What's relevant for the 25% test is what their rate of pay is. For salary people, it's their salary. But for hourly people, it would be their hourly rate. Now, a lot of this seems to start to get complicated, and now that we've built our simulation tool, adding the hourly rates for varying hours really isn't a challenge at all. But there's one thing I want to bring to your attention, and there is wording in the guidance that was issued on April 3rd by the SBA, and I'd like to read this to you. And the question that was in the document that was created by the SBA, it said, can lenders rely on the borrower's documentation for loan forgiveness? Now, the SBA is going to issue additional guidance on this, but it was interesting that they put this statement into the documentation that they published on April 3rd. And it says, yes, the lender does not need to conduct any verification if the borrower submits documentation supporting its request for loan forgiveness and attest that it has accurately verified the payments for eligible costs. The administrator, meaning the SBA, will hold harmless any lender that relies on the borrower's documentation, which is really different because usually any documentation that's submitted for a loan usually requires some verification by the lender to verify some of the either the numbers or whatever the documentation happens to be. This is an exact reverse situation. And that's very interesting, and I think a lot of lenders are going to feel uncomfortable with this, but I think on the forgiveness, there'll actually be like a forgiveness application, I bet. And I think that that application is going to have this attestation standard by the borrower that says, look, I've calculated all these, and the lender can rely on it. And again, it will require them to everyone to submit some documentation to support it, which is why we're going through this calculator tool, this simulation tool, because now we can easily drill down into the details and support any type of documentation process and audit process that can come up if it were to actually come up. But I think as far as the lender is concerned, I don't think that the lender will be looking for anything of substance unless they come up with a form. But I think the SBA is not going to create forms at this point in time. They're going to allow the borrower to come up with their own documentation, and as long as it's complete and it seems reasonable, then I think the lender has to accept it, and that documentation will be held available for the SBA. And now if the SBA seems to think that there might be something worth investigating, they obviously have the right to come in and audit and look at some of this documentation, which is why they're having the lender gather it, so they have a starting point as to what was attested to by the borrower. But at least now they'll have a starting point, and if they choose to audit, they can do so. But this takes the pressure off the lender, and it allows them to do the forgiveness as long as there's good documentation. And that's why we feel this simulation tool is so key, because it really documents all the steps along the way. Even if there were an error in calculation or even in data entry, there was every attempt to do things right here because we were following all the rules that were laid out. So I don't think, although we are waiting for the SBA to give guidance, I think their guidance is going to be somewhat limited than more traditional guidance, because I think that what they're trying to do is accelerate the process and make this a quick process. Thanks everyone who submitted questions, and hopefully this question and answer session was helpful.